Today I'll be reading from Hebrews chapter 4, verses 1 to 11. Therefore, since the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. For we also have had the good news proclaimed to us, just as they did. But the message they heard was of no value to them because they did not share the faith of those who obeyed. Now we who have believed enter that rest, just as God has said. So I declared on oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest. And yet his works have been finished since the creation of the world. For somewhere he has spoken about the seventh day in these words, on the seventh day God rested from all his works. And again in the passage above he says, they shall never enter my rest. Therefore, since it still remains for some to enter that rest, and since those who formerly had the good news proclaimed to them did not go in because of their disobedience, God again set a certain day, calling it today. This he did when a long time later he spoke through David, as in the passage already quoted. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. For if Joshua had given them rest, God would not have spoken later about another day. There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience.
Hello there. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me back. It's lovely to see you all again. Although I do have a little bit of a bone to pick with you, Brent, because it seems that when you're picking your preaching schedule for the year, you come across a topic and go, Tom doesn't know very much about that. Maybe we'll ask him to preach on it. Last time I was here, I was preaching on praying without giving up, and that was stressful. And this time, when I got your email about preaching on rest, I went out to her and said, Brent's asked me to preach on rest. And her response was, has he met you? And to be honest, I've been agonizing over this sermon a little bit because I have always lived an extremely full life, struggling to stop and slow down and rest, and to not feel as if I'm wasting my time or, missing out on things that I'm supposed to be doing or whatever it is. Or even as I sit down, sometimes I think maybe there's something better I should be resting at, or maybe there's something more restful I could be doing than this thing I'm doing right now. Am I wasting my rest time by not resting hard enough? I don't know if anyone else empathizes with that. But so as I've been preparing this sermon, I've been kind of really trying quite hard, I think, to come to terms with what rest is, what it means for God's people, and what it is that I could actually share with you as a way to think about rest, as some things to do that may be restful, but also then trying to figure out, okay, well, what is God wanting to do in me, and how is he tuning me for rest? And I felt a little bit like, I don't know if anyone's seen the ABC children's classic TV show Bluey, but I have 2 young kids. We've watched a lot of Bluey. And there's an episode in Bluey where they go on holiday, and Chili, Bluey's mum, finds herself unexpectedly with a little bit of time by herself at the beach. And she goes down and she sits at the beach and she takes it in. And then she thinks, I better read my book. I'll open my book. And she starts reading her book. And then she gets a couple of sentences in and, oh no, I'm at the beach. I better just sit. I shouldn't read yet. I'll just enjoy the beach. And then gets distracted by flies or whatever. And then the next scene is her coming back to the accommodation troubled. And Bandit's kind of, her husband is surprised to see her back so soon. And she says, I don't know how to relax. And I don't know how to relax. I suspect many of you also might be sitting here thinking, I don't know how to relax. And so today it's my hope that Jesus might teach us how to relax and that we might be free to enjoy his rest. So I might pray and then we will get into some scripture. God, this is not easy. In a culture that prizes hard work and being self-made and rising above your circumstances against the pressures of life, it is difficult for us to stop and maintain perspective and know what is necessary and what isn't. And God, I pray that for all of us this morning, you might be refreshing us, bringing to mind attitudes that we have that prevent our rest, prevent us from resting in you, prevent us from living in a helpful rhythm, both for our effectiveness, but also for our enjoyment of the gifts that you've given us and the life that we have in you. Open our eyes to your word and to your wisdom this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. So I asked Brent to kind of open the Bible reading with that passage from Hebrews this morning, because I want to make the point at the outset that rest here, I think for us, needs to have a little bit of a now, not yet kind of background to it. Because in the Bible, a lot of the times when we're talking about rest, we are also talking a little bit about kind of heaven. Jesus has come back and restored creation and we're all kind of saved and living forever with him. Everything is perfect, and that is perfect rest. And when we look forward to that rest, when we embrace rest now, we are kind of trying to bring that pattern forward and experience it for us. And so when the writer to the Hebrews is talking about people not entering God's rest and entering God's rest, there's this dual thing there talking about rest is salvation, but also rest is a break from work and personal striving and self-sufficiency. There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God, collectively. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his, their attempts to save themselves. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience. There's an attempt here to set up as opposite God's grace to us in offering us this rest, that Israel attempted and failed to enter the rest of God through laws and regulations and a list of things that were and were not allowed on the Sabbath and that were and were not allowed to do for God. Endless list. And it did not serve them. It could not serve them. They could not keep it. And so it is God's encouragement to us to instead rest from our works and embrace God's rest, which he offers to us freely. And this rest is described in Matthew chapter 11. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Does anyone feel at the moment weary and burdened? I do from time to time. Thank you for the hand up the back. That was excellent. It's not often people feel courageous to just put a hand straight up. Thank you. I was reflecting on this passage a little while ago, actually before I was preparing this sermon. I was reading it in the context of like a young adults Bible study that I've started running this year, and feeling kind of overwhelmed at some of the scenarios these young men were going through, and how possibly could I be the one entrusted to steward them through some of these things. And as I read this, felt God kind of say to me, you're doing this with me. And when you take my yoke upon you, it is not to strive ahead, but you learn to work and live at my pace. And my pace is slow and easy and gentle. And I don't contribute to your burden, but I share it. And that makes it light. And so the first point I want to make this morning, on a kind of broad philosophical sense, that if we are looking for rest, real, true rest, that rest comes from faith in Jesus. To be able to put aside our work and embrace the gift of rest that he offers us requires a fundamental understanding that he is the one who sets our pace, that he is the one who is in charge, and that even when we stop, he continues. But also then, I think, secondly, to say that that rest, actually I've just lost my train of thought, so I'll keep going. We get here, the transition from the Old Testament to the New Testament is, an opposition of a list of regulations and demands to our freedom that is freely offered to say, come to me and rest in me, a person, a relationship, not a list of do's and don'ts. But here in Deuteronomy chapter 5, we see this. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, or any foreigner residing in your towns, so that your male and female servants may rest just as you do. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. There's a sense here, the first time the Sabbath command is stated, it's based on that same rationale that we had in Hebrews. God rested on the seventh day from all of his works, and it's a privilege and it's a commandment to also emulate God and rest from our work. Kind of, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for us. But also, it's an honor to be able to do the same things that God does. But here, this is almost an act of resistance to our human tendencies, to say that, Israel, you used to be slaves, but you're not slaves anymore. And the main way that you exercise that freedom is stopping work. In Egypt, you never stopped work. You couldn't stop work. And now you have this amazing gift to be able to take a day off. But also, you have to take a day off so that everybody who works for you can take a day off. And everybody in your whole community should stop at the same time so that no one feels the burden of being a slave to anyone else and needing to work when others are resting. And so there's this sense too that rest is a kind of a community thing, because it's hard to rest when people around you aren't resting, isn't it? It's difficult to lock yourself into that kind of space when you've got someone in the next building over, or in your home, or even in your team at work or something like that, that is pushing and striving, and you have to kind of resist that. So rest for us is also remembering our freedom. Unlike Israel, we were not slaves to Egypt, but we have been slaves to many things, haven't we? Again, on a large philosophical sense, we are no longer slaves to our sin. Jesus has set us free from the things that we used to do to try and save ourselves. But also because our identity and our worth and our perspective is found in him, we are also free to rest from the pressures of our culture, the pressures of our workplaces, the pressures of our other parents judging our parenting, the pressures of not working hard enough to afford a fancy car or having a huge house or whatever it is. We rest almost as an act of opposition to those external and internal forces that would like to enslave us. I don't know about you, but the main way that I have noticed this exercise itself in my life over the last couple of years probably is an increasing enslavement to my device. I've always had a fairly addictive personality. Even when Facebook kind of first was available to me, I would have been like 15, I think. I was always I had not very high resistance to the scrolling down my feed and getting to the bottom of all of the inane updates that my friends would put up there and pictures that they would post of their food or whatever. And then I'd go back to the top and refresh it and see if anything new was there. Like, I used to do that anyway, which you laugh, and it is absurd, but that is the kind of thing that I did. Or I would get home from school before Facebook and hop on MSN Messenger. Any MSN Messenger pals? Yeah, good, thank you. Up the back too, I appreciate that. And I would sit there and I would send messages and I would wait for my friends to respond, and it would take my focus. But the thing that I've found over the last little while is as these things have become more and more tuned to take advantage of me, to steal my focus and attention and my preferences and my data, it is becoming even less restful, isn't it? Because rest is something that should be giving us life and giving us energy, giving us the freedom that Jesus has given us. And instead, I find these things taking, extracting, and you leave them feeling garbage, feeling awful, feeling exhausted, distracted instead of centered. And I would stay up after, I wouldn't just be distracted during the day from when the kids need me from anything, this phone always calling to me in my pocket. But after everyone had gone to sleep and I had some moments to myself, I would tell myself, I'll just take a break from the day before I go to sleep. And I'll watch a couple of videos and then I'll go and I'll bring up YouTube or Facebook or whatever and find nothing in there that was sufficiently satisfying that I could stop. But things that were sufficiently interesting that I wouldn't give up. And half an hour would become an hour, would become 2 hours, would become 3 hours, would become 2 a.m. And I wouldn't even know that that was the time. And then my phone would run out of battery and I would have to stop. Or it would be so absurd that I had to go to bed because I needed to get up for work in the morning. And it's no thing to say that these things, they pretend to be rest, don't they? But they're not giving us anything. And there are so many things like that. So I want to say that rest equally, just as it's a free gift, requires some discernment and requires some intentionality. Because it's not just phones. I use that as an example because it's a particularly insidious one for me. And I suspect for quite a few other people. But it can be anything. I think we have to know ourselves a little bit and know our options in a way to be able to say, yes, this is rest. Or no, that's not rest. I'm not doing that today. Or I'm not doing that right now. Because I'm also not going to say that we all have the privilege of a whole day off, right? That's not everyone's scenario, and we're not bound to take a Sabbath day as Israelites were. And yet we still have a calling and an offer of the principle of rest. And we should be clear and intentional about the things that we allow into that space of rest and make sure that they are serving us and not extracting from us things that we don't want them to take. I'm reminded a little bit of this story from Luke chapter 10. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you're worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." Stopping is half the battle, but then choosing the restful thing is also not easy. I'm sure many of you would have a similar experience to me where you end up with some free time or some rest time, and you actually get to sit down and go, I have absolutely no idea what I want to do with this time, what I should do with this time, what I can do with this time. But equally, just like Martha, sometimes we get so caught up in our busyness and our responsibilities and our schedules that we lack the perspective to stop and to sit and make those intentional choices. Sometimes we actually do need somebody else to come and say, hey, take a break. The things that you're doing are not important right now. If you want to be that person for somebody else, that's an amazing thing. Something that we should be able to do in our communities together. But also be prepared, because interrupting anyone in a state like that, I know from personal experience, I'm sure many of you have also tried to interrupt someone in the heights of their overwork stress. It's not always pleasant. People don't want to stop when they're caught up in things like this. It's a little bit like this. I don't know if you've seen this show, The IT Crowd. I'm full of TV references today. This is great. The IT Crowd popularized kind of a meme of tech support, but it really is the most valuable thing that you can do as a first step if you run into trouble with your computer or your phone or anything, which is, have you tried turning it off and on again? Or I guess have you tried turning it off and on again? Is my best accent. Hannah's looking at me like she does better than that. Anyway, the point is, what happens with our devices and our computers, as best I understand it? I'm a little bit of a nerd, but not like an actual computer programmer. But our devices, the longer that they run, right, they run into variables and scenarios that the people who engineered them and designed them can't really foresee. It's incredibly complicated and complex. And sometimes they just get caught in interactions that you just can't predict, and it breaks the thing that it's trying to do. You know, like, why doesn't my PowerPoint open today? I don't know. Try turning it off and on again. And you know what? Most of the time, that fixes it, doesn't it? Because you can reset it to a state where everything is accounted for and nothing strange has happened, and it can work as it's intended. Sometimes, I think, as incredibly complex beings, don't we also need to regularly just reset? And go back and take a break and start again from a fresh perspective. Especially if you've had a really difficult week, a really stressful project on at work. It's easy to just push through and go, no, I have to finish this. I have to keep going. I can't stop now. I've got the momentum. But actually the momentum is what's burning you out and stopping you from seeing your problem clearly and being able to go, I don't need to do this right now. I can do something else that's going to prepare me to do that better. Mark chapter 2 says this. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath? He answered, have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat. And he also gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath. And this is, I think, the main point that I want to make this morning. This is what I felt like God was saying to me as I agonized over trying to find some 5-step rest program that I could recommend to you, or a list of activities that would guarantee you find some peace and rest and help you slow down in your lives. That Sabbath rest was made for us. It is made for our benefit and as a gift to us. It is not an assignment to be perfected. Because didn't Old Testament Israel already try that? As they created their list of rules and regulations about what rest is and what rest isn't, did it get them into their rest? Maybe it got them close, but not all the way, not effectively, not permanently. Rest is a thing that God extends and has offered to us, for us, to enjoy and to engage with in a way that serves us. And so we have the freedom to be able to enjoy it in a way that serves us. And so all of you, like me, overworked, overstressed, maybe, I guess the old school way, or like you might say like type A personalities, I guess, we need to resist the temptation to rest the right way, to rest the perfect way, to optimize and maximize our rest, and instead embrace it as a gift to be enjoyed in whatever form it comes and whatever form we can take it. So, that being said, I'm not going to hop down here today without some ideas of how we can do it, because I have been trying over the last couple of months and reading. And I found a couple of frameworks that I think might be helpful. Some of these will blend into the next couple of weeks of your sermons too, so I'm not going to steal anyone's thunder as you guys look at delight and worship in the next 2 weeks as kind of aspects of a Sabbath day. But Tim Keller has a really helpful framework up on his website. And he says that a rested, well-balanced life has some of these characteristics taken and folded into it. Some kind of avocational activity is what he says, which is kind of like something someone else might do for work that is stimulating to your mind, requires some input, but has no consequences. You don't need to earn money from it, you do it for fun. Something that is enough to get you into a bit of a flow state, but actually doesn't require anything else. So for me, I bake. We've developed a bit of a rest routine as a family where we have a Friday night movie night, and then on Saturday mornings we wake up and watch Lego Masters together. And it's great because Lego Masters kind of inspires us with creativity and fun, and we get to enjoy that together. And then for movie night, we have some kind of fast food. But we don't go and get the fast food, I make the fast food. And it takes me a very long time. So I'll make pizza dough and we'll make pizzas, or I'll make bread rolls and smash burgers and we'll make burgers. Or if I'm feeling really adventurous, I'll deep fry fish and chips or something. Like, it's not healthy because I cook it, but I enjoy making it. And we miss this, just as an aside, as a society, because anytime anybody develops a hobby at the moment, I feel, as soon as they become a little bit good at it, there's so much pressure to turn it into a business, right? Like, oh, you're a really good artist, you should sell your paintings. As soon as you do that, you poison it as rest, don't you? Second thing is you should nurture relationships. You should be able to have some community and some support and some care and some friends to enjoy and laugh with in your rest time. Obviously, some contemplative exercise. Jesus withdraws to lonely places to pray. He slows himself down in his ministry too, and so should we. An aesthetic experience, maybe you want to go and be awed by the beauty of nature, by birdsong, or you want to go to an amazing concert, or visit the gallery and be inspired. There's something about creativity that fuels us. And then also, he would recommend some unplanned time, to just have space, to have buffer to be able to do whatever you want in the moment and enjoy the opportunities that you have. Maybe you want to play a board game all of a sudden and you have an hour to do that. Or you want to go out for coffee with a friend and you have free time to actually make that happen instead of having to schedule that 4 months in advance. The last thing that Tim Keller would say that I haven't written there actually is also to approach your work in a restful way. Old Testament Israel had a pattern of not harvesting 100% of the crops in their fields. They would take 90% and leave the edges for others. And a lot of people would draw out of that a principle that actually you don't have to work at 110% capacity all of the time. Actually work at 90% capacity and work at 90% for longer than you could work at 100%. Go home at 5. Pick up your work the next day and you'll be able to do your job for 30 years instead of 5 or whatever it is. And then also, I want to recommend a book to you. So on the right column, there's a book here by a GP in America. It's called Sacred Rest, The 7 Types of Rest. And because the lady who writes this book is a GP, she's very kind of clinical in how she approaches rest. She's broken it down into 7 categories there: physical, mental, sensory, creative, emotional, social, and spiritual rest. And I feel like most of those are self-explanatory. I think we can figure out what kind of things would fit into those categories as rest. But the thing I like about this framework is you can look at it and go, okay, if I'm planning out my rest time for this week, what am I feeling most zapped in? What about this week, which of my energy reserves here of these categories has been extracted, has been used up, is feeling the most depleted? And I'm going to target that with my rest activity this week. And so as I was reading these things, I attempted to put this into practice. So I noticed that actually what I feel most at the end of the day is emotionally exhausted. I spend a lot of my time managing my children's emotional states, managing my emotional state for the benefit of my co-workers and the people around me and my family, and also managing other people's emotional states. And what I miss and what has fallen out of my life is time with people where I can be unfiltered, where I don't have to manage them and they don't have to manage me, but we can simply enjoy being together. Hannah and I get to do that a little bit, but most of our time together is with the kids, so you still have to be a little bit filtered. But also, I have let most of my old friendships disappear. And so this month I've reached out to friends from high school that I haven't spoken to for ages, 5, 6 years, maybe even just 6 months, and scheduled in, hey, come for dinner, or let's go for dumplings. We haven't eaten dumplings in 6 years, let's go do that. And found it to be incredibly refreshing and renewing to be able to just sit with people and not have to be on, not have to be whatever I needed to be for them in that situation, but just to be whatever I wanted to be in that situation and be refreshed that way. I've deleted all the apps off my phone, pretty much. And now I don't sit there at night and scroll. I read, or I go to bed, or I do any of the other things off this list. And I found it to be a start. I'm not going to say that there's a 5-step program that I've given you here. But what I am saying is that this rest is a gift that God has extended to us. And it takes practice. Just like any of the disciplines that you'll find in the Christian life, it's not something that you're going to sit down and go, I'm going to rest today. And you're probably not going to get to the end of your first or even all of your rest times and feel like you've done it right. Feel like you've rested beautifully and now you're ready for the next week. It's a bit of trial and error, and it's a bit of taking what comes. But still, Jesus has made us to need rest, but also to enjoy rest. And he has offered to give it to us. And so we have the ability to practice and take it. I want to leave us with this psalm, which most of the time when this gets read is like a correction, right? I want to read it this morning for us as a blessing. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain you rise up early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat. For he grants sleep to those he loves. May we find God's rest as we explore what is available to us and as we practice this together. Amen.